Hey everyone, it is Thursday, and you know what that means? That means our expert series. We are speaking with Jonathan Twomley. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you, Michael?
I'm doing very well. Well, this is going to be a fun episode. This is number 3 for us, and this is what is going on in multifamily. So what'd you find?
Yeah, so we're starting to get some data about what happens with multifamily when additional CARES Act money runs out.
Mhm.
And what we saw, so just kind of reminding people of the history of this. I mean, we're now month 8 of coronavirus,
Yeah.
and it's all a big blur, and it's hard to remember sort of where we were when we started. But when we started, the first reaction of the multifamily industry was, "Oh my goodness, people are out of work. They're not going to have money to pay rent. We're going to hoard cash and just go and hunker down and go into defensive mode." And
Hmm.
so they did. And all the syndicators I know stopped paying distributions
Yep.
because they wanted to make sure that they had cash, to pay debt service and have a small problem rather than a big problem.
Yep.
Now, what happened was, since Congress passed the CARES Act and they passed all this additional unemployment relief, um, the renters were able to pay rent, and rent collections stayed strong really throughout. And everybody was surprised but relieved. And what happened was collections continued to be good, and syndicators started paying distributions again. And after a while, I think people started to really believe that multifamily is kind of impervious to any problems with the economy, uh, and that that old talk about it being recession proof was true.
Hmm.
Now, I always felt like, hey, but we just don't. We're waiting for the other shoe to drop here because this money is going to run out, and what happens when it does?
Hmm.
Now, one good thing was that a lot of people got so much money from the government in unemployment that they were able to save money, and they did and they did the economically rational thing, which was that they knew that this was going to end, so they banked the money. They just didn't go and spend it,
Hmm.
and they prioritized rents. So what happened was, even after the CARES Act extra money ran out, they continued to pay their rent for a couple of months. Now, however, what we're starting to see is that the savings are running out, and it's starting to affect rents and starting to affect occupancies. Now,
Hmm.
it's not dire by any stretch, right? Things are holding up pretty well, but the cracks are starting to be shown. And where the cracks are appearing first is uh, in the Class A space. And that's a combination of a couple things. That's not so much a factor of people not getting unemployment money, because your Class A renters are your most affluent people within the renter class. They have resources to fall back on, and they also didn't really lose their jobs. However, what's happening amongst those people is that they're looking at uh, you know density and saying we want less of it. They're looking at low interest rates and saying we really like that. We want to go buy a house. Now's the time. We've been sitting on the fence. We're also talking about the long-awaited transition of the millennial generation to home ownership, which actually started in 2016 and has just been, steadily climbing since then, but now gotten a real, kick in the pants, or real push from behind because of the combination of coronavirus and low interest rates. So that is really accelerating. So your Class A properties plus, and then the other factor on top of that is massive deliveries of new Class A product in all of your major markets, right?
Hmm.
So those two things happening at once. The industry has already delivered 400,000 units this year.
Oh, wow.
Most of them are in certain sort of like basically 12 top markets.
Right.
Um, and you've got places that have been multifamily darlings like Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, are running into a big problem with oversupply of Class A. So that is one thing that's happening on the Class A level. Now, lots of people look at that and say, well, Class B and Class C are insulated from this. Not true, right? So because what happens is, and it's starting to happen, and there's an article in Globe Street that came out just the other day. called A Closer Look at Multifamily's Widening Cracks. This came out on the 3rd, so it's a week ago.
Okay.
What this article is talking about is analyzing data from Fannie Mae that what is starting to happen and is going to happen more is, as Class A is ratcheting up their concessions, right? They're trying to stay full by offering people primarily free rent, right? And even with the free rent being offered, they're having to start to make rent cuts now, which is really the thing that owners hate to do. They would rather tack on another month of free rent, 1 month, then 2 months, then 3 months, because they know that burns off and then they're going to keep their rents high. They really don't want to cut rents because then it's very hard to raise them again. But that's starting to happen because occupancy is starting to crumble a bit and they're having to ramp up these concessions and starting to do rent cuts. When the Class A does that, then it just starts to trickle down, because now you've got suddenly your Class B renters looking around and going, gosh, for just a couple bucks more, I can now get the newest, shiniest, best new apartment in the marketplace with all the bells and whistles. And it's not going to cost me that much more than Class B. So what happens? Class B has to start engaging in this race to the bottom of concessions too. And it'll eventually get down to Class, and then it'll happen with Class C. Class C has another headwind, which is that disproportionately the people who have been hardest hit by this recession, and every recession, it's not just the COVID shutdowns, this happens every time, the Class C renter, right? People making below $75,000 a year are the people who have been hardest hit by this recession. And with the money running out, and those people are the ones who have the least money saved up to, they banked some of these additional benefits, but that's gone now. It's starting to show. And so you've got rent declines starting to happen. And in fact, a different Globe Street article from the 6th called, just the headline will tell you what the point is, multifamily rents declined at record pace in the 3rd quarter, right? So, and that's all kind of at the end of the 3rd quarter, right? So vacancy rates are now back. They've been historically low for a long time. They're now back at over 5% across the country, which is really kind of like the standard, sort of where that's the long-term trend. That's what you underwrite to, is 5% vacancy.
That's
right?
what all the books say.
Yeah. And that's kind of historically, everything is kind of keyed to that 5% vacancy mark, right? That's, that's when you're operating a property, if you're at 95%, that's when you start raising rents, right? Because that last 5% is really frictional, right? It's people, the normal move in, move out, right? But when you're at 95%, if you get up, the rule of thumb has always been, if you get up to 96, 97%, you're not charging enough rent, right? Because 95% is that kind of like, benchmark where you're like, if you get below, okay, you got to get some concessions, do a little to get it back up to 95. If you're up at 97, 98, you should be charging more rent. If you're, same thing with occupancies, like if you're down, if the market is too far below 95%, lenders are not going to lend money for new construction, right? If it's over, then lenders are happy to lend money for new construction. So 95% occupancy is a critical number in the industry. And now we're back at that number. And there's, we still have a lot of deliveries to make of new product in these markets. There have been a little bit of pullback, but we're still looking at another, 100,000 markets, coming on, 100,000 units coming online.
Yeah.
So we've got, rents fell, basically almost 2% across the board, which is, if you're underwriting, when you're buying a property, it's standard also to underwrite basically rents at inflation, which historically has been 3%. Maybe that's a little bit of a stretch now because we actually haven't had 3%, inflation for a generation, but you can still, I think, sort of safely assume in your underwriting, you may get more, right? But in your underwriting, you're going to look at like 2% rent growth, right? And if you need that rent growth to make your deal work, well, you can
Guess
get
what?
it,
Yeah.
right? You're looking at, and people who have said to me, rents never go down. Well, they say that because they're just not old enough to remember when they did go down, right?
Exactly.
And
That's funny.
yeah, I mean, and rents have gone down during recessions, and
Sure.
obviously everything is local. Some markets do better than others, but and some do worse than others, right?
Yeah,
But you have to know your market. But rents absolutely can go down,
for sure.
and we're seeing it right now. So
Yeah, I mean, the big thing for me, because when I look at all of this, it's just, this is you and I have been doing this a while, but it's still our first pandemic, right?
yeah,
This is everybody's first pandemic. And I think this has caused trends that were already starting to accelerate. You already mentioned one, millennials, right? I'm a firm believer, and I've said it to you, and I've said it on many other expert series, that I think millennials are going to be the dominant force of first-time home buyers for the next 5 to 10 years. Right?
yep.
They're increasingly getting to be over 30 years old. But millennials now, there's half of them are over 30, right? Or almost half of them. So they're going to start buying homes. And this is just accelerating a trend that started in 2016. The other thing is we are seeing migration from vertical urban cities to the suburbs. But unfortunately, as you've just mentioned, the 400,000 units to 100,000 to go, where are those units? Well, they're in the urban core. For the most part. And, I've talked to builders. One of my other experts on Mondays is a builder. And he's like, it would take 2 years to build a new tract of homes in the suburbs where you'd have to, get all the permitting and all of that stuff done. And most builders won't do it because they don't trust that the suburb price will be there in 2 years, right? It's too far. So there's just a lot of things going on that makes the suburbs prices, right? Supply demand. There's not a lot of supply, lots of demand. Where housing has already gone up 14% year on year. I think rents are going to follow in the suburbs. And then I think rents and values go down, in the cities. I think San Francisco studios are down 30% rent, 30%.
Wow. Yeah.
One bedroom's 26%. So it's just crazy numbers.
Yeah. It is crazy. And, you're seeing the single family home rental market increasing, as you've been talking about.
Oh,
This
yeah,
is
for
definitely happening. The same article I was reading is talking about the increase in the build to rent market.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
So people
Wall
are now
Street.
going and
Yeah.
constructing new homes in order to rent them out, right? Not to own them or not to occupy them, but to rent them out to others.
Mhm.
And they're taking advantage of this decentralization or de-densification
Yep.
trend that we're going through right now, which, as you and I have talked about before, this is not a forever. You can't extrapolate this into the future forever. There's an ebb and flow for everything. So you'll see be a big push into that.
Mhm.
This time next year, everybody will, you always are putting markers down.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put a marker down right now. This time next year, everybody is going to be talking about how, the trend towards suburbanization is going to last forever. This is what people want. They're going to be giving you reasons for why you should overpay for single family homes,
Exactly.
right? I guarantee you this. And then
It'll be just the time to buy in San Francisco.
right, and you'll see, that bubble collapse, and then
Absolutely.
you'll see people buying stuff cheap, under the radar in San
Yeah.
Francisco. This happens every time, and I actually want to point out something really interesting that I just came across, which is, I've always been, my personal preference has always been to invest in markets that are a little bit under the radar.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I never went to Texas was because even when I started out in 2011, 2012, I saw the attention being paid to Texas, and it just made me feel like this is too frothy. There's too much attention being paid to this. That can't be good. Now, it's really sustained itself for a very long time, which has been fantastic for people who invested there.
Yeah.
But all good things come to an end. And one of the problems with these kind of hot markets is that they get very, very hot and then they get very, very cold.
Yes.
Right. And so I've always preferred markets that have good fundamentals, but they're just sort of, people aren't really, there's no frenzy around them. Right. Now, certainly South Carolina has gotten a lot hotter than it was because people have noticed the good demographics, but it never got to be the same kind of like,
Yeah. It's
the
never
same kind of,
boiling. It's warm, but
yeah,
not
the same kind
boiling.
of friends around Texas. And I want to point out the Austin market, which has been the darling of a lot of people, and look, Austin has a lot of great things going for it. Things that I talk about, that, state government is never going anywhere, right? University of Texas at Austin, never going anywhere. Like these are really good anchors for investing, right? And the economy's become much more diverse with the tech industry moving into Austin. These are all really good factors, and I can understand why people are excited about this market. On the other hand, it is very easy to build in
Yes.
Texas, right? And there, and Austin just it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as it grows outward, right? And so, people look at this and they say, this is good forever. Just 2 data points. 2009, Austin has now been recognized in the industry as a boom and bust market, right? Because it's so easy to build. So 2009, there was a massive oversupply problem in Austin and rents declined 13% in Austin. Then construction ground to a dead halt, right?
Yep.
But the population kept on coming. And in 2011, rents went up 14%. Now, as Michael has reminded us frequently, 13% decline and 14% increase does not bring you back to where you were, right? Because you're working off a much lower base. Nevertheless, it just shows you how important that supply and demand function is, right? And, construction has really ramped up in Austin. There's a lot of units coming online there. And now we're going to see that again. So if you've been investing in a place like Austin and you've been assuming, that the phenomenal rent growth you've seen there is just going to be like that forever, and your business plan has been dependent on that, you may be in for a rough spell. And so as this product continues to come online and demand has fallen. So just the lesson is, never extrapolate these trends forever into the future, and don't use them to justify overpaying for anything. I know it gets harder to buy stuff. And look, I deal with this. It's incredibly frustrating, right? I know how frustrating it is. You want to be doing deals and the deals don't make sense.
Yep.
Somebody is buying them, but those people who are buying them are making these assumptions that, some of them are going to get burned.
Absolutely.
Some of them will be lucky, and then they're going to brag about how they were right. But you can be wrong and you can be lucky, right? Yeah. So you can't sort of generalize these across the board when you're trying to be a conservative investor. You can't say, oh, that guy didn't get hurt the last time around, so I'll be okay, right? It's you have to really take these things seriously, and nobody saw this coming, and here we are, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, folks, do yourself a favor. If you've been thinking about investing, or you are investing in multifamily anywhere in the country, you have to join Multifamily Launchpad. And just so you know, Jonathan's doing something in the next 3 or 4 days that you need to be paying attention to, because you could save some money. So Jonathan, why don't you talk about what you're doing for Multifamily Launchpad?
Yeah, so moving into 2021, we're changing the program quite a bit. I'll be making some more announcements about that later. But the thing that you should know today is that after Sunday, the 15th, this program will no longer be available whenever you want to join. We're going to be returning to the limited access that we used to have, because it's just administratively much easier to deal with it that way. So we're going to turn off new memberships until March. And when they come back on, they're going to be priced at double the current price. So price is going from $97 a month to $197 a month. If you join before Sunday, you will lock that $97 price in for as long as you're a member. So the time to get in at the current price is now. And if you miss it, then a lot more. So if you've been sitting on the fence, been thinking about this for a while, really now is the time to act on it and get in while the price is still as low as it is.
Yeah, folks, you've got to join the program. Multifamily Launchpad's legit. You can go back and watch probably 30 or 40 hours of material with Jonathan on this channel. He has his own playlist. If you haven't seen the video where we do the math on a apartment building, you need to do that, because it shows you how a building go from 120 to 60 in a very quick minute. And again, these are things you're going to learn about with Multifamily Launchpad. You're going to get in the flow. You're going to feel comfortable not doing a deal because you're being conservative, and you'll be able to ask Jonathan any and all questions. So Jonathan, I think it's a great program. You should see lots of people sign up by Sunday to save some money.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, take care. Thanks.